Hey, guys. Welcome to Building This Community.
This is your city business and policy development podcast. We're your hosts,
Luke Patrick
and Andrew Klump. Welcome to this week's episode of Building This Community. Today, we don't have a guest. We are simply trying to do a season 1 recap.
Yeah, we want to wrap up the season, maybe touch on anything we might have missed out on any of the episodes, and give you guys an update on where we stand for season 2.
Yeah. And so the goal here is, what types of things have we learned from maybe some of these episodes that we can highlight? And then also, what's our goal for this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing I think is incredibly important, just starting from the beginning, the Trees Louisville episode with Cindy Sullivan. Again, she was phenomenal, as most of our guests were. But one thing I didn't mention that I feel a little remorse of is that there's a really important policy that I think most local legislators are not aware of. And that is, when repaving roads, being aware of historical trees. So, for example, in Audubon Park, last time we just repaved, I went out and made sure, met with our arborist, met with some civil engineers to make sure where we have historic trees protruding into the street and essentially pushing up the roadway.
Yeah.
How to deal with that, right? And so what our paving company did is they paved around it. And they milled maybe some of the initial concrete off the top, but they paved around the tree.
Rather than just like shearing off the tree and like keeping the road as is, right?
Yeah. So like a milling machine could just go straight and do a clean cut, which we've had that happen in the past. And I know if you go around in other places in Louisville, Tyler Park, for example, there's legitimately, the Metro repaved the street and it just kept the street at its purported width and did a clean cut. The route is just cut square.
Yeah. And I'm sure that probably damaged, if not killed, several trees.
Yeah. I've talked to an arborist in the past that said any tree that has happened to will likely be down within 10 years. And that's like, it could be 100-year-old tree that could be down within 10 years because of just not doing the diligence to pave around trees that have protruded into the street.
And I mean, that's a tough trade-off. I understand not wanting to like give too wide of a bump out, on the curb, because it could be, you don't want drivers to be, kind of unaware and then like curb their car or something. But like
well, it's already there. I mean, like they're literally already either driving over it or going around it as is.
True. But no, it's just one of those things where like you wish that they would listen more to kind of the experts, and in this instance it'd be arborists and people with kind of a background. And
it's an awareness thing. And then it also, guess what it does? People that talk about wanting speed bumps, if you have trees protruding into the street, guess what happens? People slow down, they go around it, and and it keeps with the beauty of the street rather than putting in something that's noisy and I think, in my opinion, overbearing on streets, like speed bumps.
Absolutely.
Another couple of issues I think that we touched on, I think the important aspect of having on the cooperative podcast with Casa Heron, the co-working podcast with Bridget Morrissey, and the Benefit Corps with
B Corps
with Ben Smock.
Oh yeah.
Those 3 podcasts, I think, to me, kind of gets at the goal of our podcast series.
Oh yeah. It's like a new approaches to business, new avenues to try and expand your business or expand your workspace, and they're things that you 5-10 years ago you really didn't see in Kentucky. Especially for B Corps, we didn't have.
Still, you don't really see a ton of them in Kentucky.
Exactly, but we're seeing more interest, and hopefully that will materialize into actual developments in that realm, and we can see more co-working spaces, more businesses that are formed as B Corps, and anything that we could do to try and get the word out, like I'm happy for.
Well, and again, this podcast is about city development, right? So it's, how do we bring ideas that we are seeing in other places? And so what we want to do is, I think, start having a little more national, international perspective, maybe next season. But what those 3 locals did that we interviewed is that they are working to bringing these national and international concepts. So we talked on those podcasts about how co-working spaces and cooperatives are huge in Barcelona and Spain.
Yeah.
And then also, if you look at the coastal cities in America, co-working spaces are getting big, or have been big. Asia has had co-working spaces forever. And then you also have cooperatives, and benefit corps are very big. I mean, if you have a benefit corp in New York or LA, people seek out those companies to buy from simply because of their purpose.
Yeah.
And then you also have cooperatives being useful in a variety of ways. I mean, San Francisco is in a housing crisis right now, and they're using housing cooperatives to help alleviate some of those issues. So it really is just saying, okay, where are these policies working? How can we use them here? And it was very important to us to have people bringing these new ideas into the state, things that we haven't seen be successful here in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. It hits on the idea that, I mean, we mentioned it with Michael Lindenberger when we were talking about looking at Houston and trying to mimic the best ideas of cities around the country, of cities internationally, take the good and kind of leave the bad, and incorporate that into our decision making, into our policy making here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's kind of one thing I wanted to bring up too, maybe with like the co-working spaces, is that you're starting to see more innovation in that space too. So you have the traditional type, which is what Bridget is doing, where it's the pay and you get the space, you get access to conference rooms, other things like that. Some places are starting to do free ones. I think Asia's done some. Chase Bank is kind of doing like a coffee shop idea in
try and
in
drive people into the bank for other purposes, but then maybe they'll end up using their services.
Exactly. So it's an interesting concept. I think the free ones are, let's just make a coffee shop more business oriented, have breakout space available, and just upcharge the coffee. So it's an interesting concept. I think different ways of that can work. And it's all about community building, I think, which is what Bridget hit on. So it's just interesting to kind of keep tabs on those industries and see how it's evolving and seeing what's working and what's not.
And honestly, I don't think that's a bad idea at all. I know I get most of my studying and most of my business done at coffee shops, all around the city. So like if they were to just lean into that a little bit harder, I think they could easily see a huge benefit, to being able to provide that space for people to meet and talk and discuss, their businesses. It's a good idea, I think,
Yeah, for sure. And then I think the other one we probably want to talk about is the Michael Lindenberger episode. He gave good insights onto the culture of where national reporting is going, and then also where local reporting in Louisville in particular.
Yeah, and I know we hit on this in that episode, but bringing it back to talking about local artists and what we could do to kind of incentivize that. I thought that was one of the most unique perspectives, one of the most unique suggestions when we asked about policy changes that our guests would have liked to have seen. And I really loved that discussion. I think it's not something that I thought about ever prior to hearing him mention it, but I've thought about it a lot since. And I think anything we could do to try and drive that type of artistic innovation is overall a great thing for our city.
Yeah. Well, and I think he brought up two of the 3 ideas that were spurred just from our conversations that I want to delve more into in the future, whether it's season 2 or beyond. But he brought up the idea, or we talked about zoning with him. I think would be a great standalone episode. And he also talked about the arts, which I think would also be a great standalone episode, seeing how other cities develop their own art culture. And the other one that came up was Albert Stammer, bringing up the idea of bourbonism, and just maybe we need to get someone from the bourbon industry in the future just to kind of talk more about where that industry is going. I mean, alcohol plays a role in most major cities, but it probably plays a bigger role in Kentucky and Louisville, more so than any. So those are definitely some areas I want to go into. And the other area that I think we need to go on to quickly is in urban planning perspective at some point.
Yeah.
Whether that's from a bicycling perspective or whether that's just from a pure street design or back into zoning, it can kind of blend, but there's so many different avenues that you can go through from a planning perspective.
No question. And you mentioned bicycling, and it's funny because I've seen, and you've mentioned, I think before, that Louisville consistently ranks high on the list of like bicycle friendly cities, like across the nation. And I don't know that the actual experience in riding around the city
matches
makes that. Yeah, it's not a fair description. I don't think
it's purely, if you look at it, like the maps that the city puts out, I think the reason we rank high on some of those, and again, I'm not a cyclist, but I think we rank high because there is a large number of bike lanes.
There's a high total number of biking lanes,
and they also count the suburban streets that are low traffic that they put sharrows on that have been proven to not do anything.
Yeah, people don't know how to use them,
and
it's like traffic circles. You know, they're great in theory, but people have to understand.
Well, I love traffic circles.
Oh no, they're great. They're great. The issue is people not knowing what to do.
Well, but sharrows just tell you to slow down. I mean, or to share the road. That doesn't provide any guidance. Whatsoever. But the other issue too is that there are bike lanes all, throughout a lot of our parks that also get to count towards it. And we are a good park city.
Yeah.
So all of that adds up together to making us appear like we're one. If you look at the map and take away certain, like the park lanes or maybe some of the suburban sharrows, there's nothing. And the bike lanes just do not connect.
That's the biggest issue. There's gaps. That prevent
massive gaps.
There's massive gaps to prevent a continuous path along that would be useful, I think, for the city.
Agreed. Well, so with that said, I think we probably want to wrap this up a little bit here soon, but I think we want to talk about where we want to go next season. And our first season, we were releasing weekly. I think we're going to scale that back and start doing bi-weekly episodes just because we give really dense topics. We want to give people enough time to listen and have more of a digestion of what we're hitting on.
Yeah. And give us time to prep, get ready for the guests in an appropriate manner so that, we can ask them the hard-hitting questions that you guys have come to expect.
And then I think we want to continue to get that national, international perspective of different policies and different industries that would shed light and compare to a place like Louisville that may not have all those policies or industries like a coastal city or an international city might have.
Yeah. Also gives us more time to schedule around scheduling conflicts.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true too. So, but that's where we're going. And we certainly appreciate you all listening to us. And hopefully if you have guest suggestions, what do you think they should do, Luke?
I think they should reach out to us on Twitter or on our email. On Twitter, you can find us at buildingthiscom, or you can reach out to either of us individually. I'm at LMP43.
And I'm Andrew J. Klump.
Absolutely.
And so then our Gmail is buildingthiscommunity@gmail.com. Yeah. So any way you want to reach out to us, feel free. If you have guest suggestions or connections, we are always open to hear new ideas and new concepts because that's, again, the point of this podcast.
Yeah, your all's input really helps us out a lot.
So, well, anyways, guys, thanks. And we certainly appreciate you listening.
Definitely. We'll see you guys next season. As always, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for joining us on Building This Community. If you'd like any more information, you can follow us on Twitter at BuildingThisCom, COM, or you can follow Andrew
at Andrew J. Klump. And you can also follow Luke
at LMP43. Definitely subscribe, and we look forward to talking to you guys next week.